Very good morning to you, Robert Jenrick. I want to ask you first.
Good morning.
Who, in your opinion, is the best ever Conservative leader or Prime Minister? Who would a Robert Jenrick leader be modelled on?
Oh, good question. Well, it may be cliched, but Margaret Thatcher was my great hero. My mum and dad came here to Birmingham in the Black Country in the late 1970s and set up a business in the 80s, and were incredibly inspired by her and the can-do free enterprise culture she created in this country, and that helped to inspire me ultimately to be a Conservative and to go into politics.
And sorry, carry on, Ed.
And I said earlier when we were talking about this that since Margaret Thatcher, of all the Conservative leaders there have been since then, the leader that you are closest to now, ideologically, in terms of your policies and your prescription for Britain, leaving the ECHR, your views about tax, is not David Cameron or Boris Johnson. It's actually Liz Truss. Liz Truss is now your closest political soulmate?
No, Ed. In fact, I've been very clear that the mini-budget that happened in the autumn of 2022 was very damaging to my party's reputation for sound management of the public finances. I thought it was careless and unconservative. And one of my missions, if I'm lucky enough to lead this party, is to restore our reputation for sound management of the economy and to reclaim the mantle of low tax and pro-growth after that period. I want to be taking the Conservative Party back into delivering for the British people on the economy, the NHS and our borders. Those are things that millions of our fellow citizens care about, and I want to ensure our party is coming up with the serious answers to those big challenges.
I was just pointing out that you and Liz Truss were both big supporters of David Cameron 15 years ago, and you've both been on a bit of a journey, and you've both ended up much more to the right of the Conservative Party, much more to the right than Boris Johnson, who wanted to stay in the ECHR, much more to the right than Theresa May. I was just pointing out that both of you have left centrist Cameroon conservatism behind.
Well, look, I don't actually think, Ed, that this is about left or right. I think it's about the common ground in British politics. I think millions of people, I would argue most people in our country, want to secure our borders. They want to control and reduce legal migration. They want us to have a very tough message on crime, and they want us to have a more united country with a greater sense of cohesion and integration. So I think you mischaracterise these issues. I think this is the common ground, and politicians, political leaders like myself should be trying to find answers to these challenges, and that's what I've tried to do in this leadership contest so far.
Dominic Grieve, the former Attorney General, said of your campaign video where you said you wanted to take back control of migration, leave the ECHR, he said it was one of the most astonishing videos I've ever seen posted by a Conservative MP, let alone a candidate for the leadership. Most of it is twaddle, a series of promises of change that leaving the ECHR will do nothing to take forward. Twaddle?
Well, look, Dominic Grieve doesn't want to leave the ECHR, so it's natural that he would make that point. I mean, there's no particular argument behind what he was saying. It's just a sort of statement. But look, last week, let me give you an example. A Ugandan man clubbed to death somebody in an ambulance in North London. And a court last week said that he cannot be removed to Uganda because Uganda doesn't have good enough mental health care for him under the ECHR. I think that's absurd, but it's also shameful. And I am not prepared to allow foreign criminals, dangerous people like him, to remain in our country. I'm not prepared for there to be terrorists clogging up our prisons or even walking free on our streets, being monitored by our security services at vast expense. And I'm not prepared for our borders to continue to be porous. For all these reasons, we have to get a grip. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to leave the European Convention on Human Rights.
OK, the awkward thing about human rights is, of course, sometimes they cover awkward cases because human rights apply to everybody, and you're inevitably going to get individual cases where your compassion for all humans actually encompasses someone who might have done something dreadful, because something dreadful might happen in another country that you don't want to countenance as a government. I want to talk about the move to the right, because according to an Ipsos poll yesterday, The person who is more popular than any of you standing for the Tory leadership is Nigel Farage. Reform's Nigel Farage leading the pack. 24% of Britons think he would be a good Prime Minister, and you and Kemi Badenoch tied at the bottom on 11%. Who is the biggest, if you become leader of the Conservatives, who is the biggest threat to you? Is it Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister? Is he your biggest challenge? Or is it Nigel Farage and the Reform Party?
Look, I think our party, the Conservatives, have a mountain to climb. We've just lost our worst ever electoral defeat.
Yeah.
So we've got to be honest about that. We've got to listen to the public, and then we've got to set out to bring back both the millions of people that we lost to Reform and the millions that we lost to Labour and the Lib Dems. I think that you do that by having very clear answers to the big challenges facing our country. How do we make sure the NHS is working for people? How do we obsess about the quality of care it's providing for patients? How do we ensure we get growth going again in the economy with a more sensible energy policy? How do we build homes for young people and get them onto the ladder?
But the trouble about that Ipsos
and
poll is it
how do we secure our borders?
Yeah, it suggests
these are the things that are going to help us.
Nigel Farage is more popular than you would be. I mean, how big a threat is the Reform Party? Can you see you holding off the Nigel Farage Reform Party threat, or can you see in the next few years bringing Reform and Nigel Farage into the party? I mean, he agrees with you, for instance, on leaving the ECHR.
Well, I see Reform as a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because my party failed to deliver on some of the big challenges, like immigration. So the answer isn't to merge with Reform or to ape Reform, although I don't denigrate it because I'm not going to denigrate the millions of people who vote for it. What I want to do is have very clear and serious answers to those big issues. And my policies is this: we should have a cap set by Parliament on legal migration in the tens of thousands. That's the only way that we'll be able to look the British public in the eye and say, this time we mean what we say, it's going to happen, unlike the promises made by politicians of all political stripes throughout my entire adult lifetime on this issue. And on illegal migration, to adopt the policy that I argued for. In fact, what was the reason why I resigned from the Cabinet at the end of last year, which is if you come here illegally on a small boat, you'll get detained and you'll be removed from our country, either back home, somewhere safe like Albania. And I signed that deal with Albania that was very effective, or to a third country. To do that policy, which I think is supported by many, many people in our country, you're going to have to leave the ECHR and create our own British Bill of Rights. Susanna, to your point, of course we care about protecting the rights and freedoms and liberties of our people. I just think that can be done by our own Parliament.
One final
and
question,
the statute and common law in this country is the right way to do that.
One final question, Mr. Jenrick. There's a really interesting Sky poll out this morning of YouGov, a YouGov poll of Tory party members. And they're asked, is it more important the next Conservative Party leader is best positioned to beat Labour? 31%. Is it more important the next Conservative Party leader represents true Conservative values? 62%. So 2-1 Conservative values rather than beating Labour. Are you the next leader who best represents true Conservative values?
Well, I think the two go hand in hand, actually, Ed. We've got to understand, what do we believe in as a party? What are our enduring principles and values? If you work through your values, you'll not be knocked off course, either in opposition or in government. That's what I want to see. But of course I want to take on Keir Starmer. You know, I think 3 months in, this is a failing Labour government. It seems so stale, despite being so fresh. And so if I'm lucky enough to lead this party, the first job is to form a really effective opposition in this country. We owe that to the British people, and that's what I want to do.
Just finally, before we let you go, the £75,000 donation that you have received through this company, Spot Fitness, are you absolutely confident that you know where that comes from and what the person who gave it wants in return?
Yeah, look, absolutely. It's normal for companies as well as individuals to donate to political parties and campaigns. If you stand for leader of any party, you have to raise money. We don't want the taxpayer to be paying for these things. this is a donation from a British company with British shareholders. The businessman behind it has made himself known. It's a sports fitness business, and we've registered it in the correct legal manner, and so there's nothing improper here at all.
OK, a company that has no employees, has never made a profit, has more than £300,000 worth of debt, and in January registered a loan from a company registered in the British Virgin Islands. But you're saying nothing to see here.
Well, this is a startup business, which is, as I understand it, developing an app for sports fitness, and it's a perfectly legitimate business. It's very normal for political parties and campaigns to take donations from companies. That happens all the time, and it's right that we do that, because I don't want to live in a country where the taxpayer is funding leadership campaigns or political parties. That's not right. So we have to rely on legitimate individuals and businesses to come forward and support political parties. And I think that's part of the political process. It's actually part of public service as well.
Okay. Surprising they've got no employees. I mean, none. What is it?
Is it something you've asked, Robert Jenrick?
Yeah, I have asked. I've met the individual behind it, and he's put out a statement saying that it's a business that's creating an app. It's a startup business. He wants to support me because he agrees with some of my views, for example, on immigration. You know, millions of people across the country support what I'm standing for here, which is controlling our borders, ensuring we finally get a grip on the mass migration that we've experienced for many, many years. I'm pleased that, as well as party members, individuals want to make private donations, the public are getting behind this campaign.
All right. Thanks very much indeed, Robert Jenrick.